I separated them between each role. So like each team has one player in each role.